With the threat of conflict growing in the Ukraine region between Russia, Ukraine, and NATO, I was thinking to myself, what would this conflict look like? Would it be possible to simulate it with any sort of simulator or game that we possibly have? And what would the outcome of that simulation be? Luckily for me, I have the perfect solution. Command Modern Operations is probably the most in-depth modern military simulator there is, and it is used by multiple nations to test certain war theories and logistics training and things like that. It perfectly simulates sensors like radar, ELINT, EW, and also combines a lot of known values of weapons, what they do, and kind of puts it all into one simulation. The game also already features a near-perfect simulation of this exact scenario. It's called Dawn of the New Era. The developers made it a few years ago, and it is a Russian invasion from the Crimea region and eastern Ukraine with limited NATO fleet support and mainly air power in the NATO region to help Ukraine. It's almost perfect minus troops in Belarus. So we cranked this simulation open to see exactly what would happen if Russia went to war in Ukraine and NATO intervened. The scenario starts with no assets inside of Ukraine. Ukrainian land and air is covered by Ukraine at the moment with a large front line in eastern Ukraine. The NATO fleet assets are a few guided missile frigates in Black Sea along with 2 Arleigh Burke destroyers and 1 submarine. Down in the Mediterranean there is an extra Arleigh Burke class destroyer with a ton of Tomahawks along with an SSGN loaded to bear with Tomahawks also. NATO air power consists of airfields loaded to bear with bombers and fighters from everywhere from Cyprus to Turkey to Italy to all the way deep into the UK. At the immediate start of this scenario, we decided to set up our support systems. So we started with getting tanker aircraft strategically positioned in areas like the German-Polish border to support fighters coming over from the UK, and also in northern Turkey and inside of Romania to help with fighters coming back from the Ukraine. This is a strategic setup to make sure that when we do launch fighters and bombers, we already have the support aircraft in the area to refuel them. We then sent out a few P-8 Poseidons. These are converted 737s with powerful search radar to find surface ships, and also MADs to be able to find underwater submarines. These were important because we needed to find the Black Sea Fleet immediately because this was our immediate threat when things kicked off. We also sent an RC-135 rivet joint into northern Turkey. This aircraft can disseminate a ton of different signals coming from Crimea and help us locate multiple SAM site positions for future strike missions on it and see what the overall capabilities of the Russians are in the Crimea region. The fighting kicks off in eastern Ukraine with multiple Russian aircraft coming in over the front lines and bombing targets over there, with ground forces coming in on the eastern front too, and multiple anti-ship missiles being fired out of Crimea towards Ukrainian vessels. No NATO assets are being targeted at the moment, so right now we're just kind of setting up and preparing aircraft to fly when needed. Some time goes by and Ukraine asks for some assistance with covering eastern Ukrainian airspace, so we task 42 F-15Cs loaded to bear with AIM-120Ds and Talon hate pods out of Romania to cover eastern Ukraine with a cap zone. Now, we put it to where there's 15 at all times over that zone, so they will always launch aircraft before other aircraft get on station and put a no-fly zone over the Crimea region so none of them accidentally stray too close. This is going to be where the main air battle is going to take place in Ukraine. Hostilities start with NATO and Russia, and after the Black Sea Fleet is spotted, it lets out a massive salvo of anti-ship missiles on all NATO ships in the region. We also take this time to launch F-16s and F-35s in cap zones over the NATO ships to cover them from air attack and also help with the salvo of anti-ship missiles. We also take the opportunity to fire on the Russian Navy intelligence ships that have been shadowing a few of our NATO ships. Harpoons are going to take them out pretty quickly, and since they aren't armed, they're not very much of a threat. The first few salvos are easily defeated, and a few of the intelligence ships are also taken out at the same time, but they are out of range of any of our NATO assets being able to fire back with any of their anti-ship missiles. Though to the north, a few of the guided missile frigates that are alone with inadequate sensors are taken off guard by a salvo of anti-ship missiles, and we end up losing one. At the same time, a guided missile frigate is torpedoed by an unknown sub, so we reroute the P-8 Poseidons and the Arleigh Burke that is in the area to go deal with the submarine threat. The submarine is spotted thanks to the P-8 Poseidon dropping some sonar buoys, and the Arleigh Burke launches a rocket-boosted torpedo towards the submarine. After the torpedo is in the water, the P-8 Poseidon makes a pass over the submarine, and thanks to its magnetic anomaly detector, it's able to detect the submarine, and the torpedo is able to home in on it and destroy it. A large air attack was then detected coming out of Crimea on the fleet. Consisting of a ton of Su-24 fencers and a few Su-30s, we dispatched a few F-16s out of Turkey to cover the NATO fleet on the Turkish coastline, and then a few F-15s and F-35s out of Romania to cover the Western Black Sea fleet in response to this. The F-16s were the first to make contact, firing majority of their AIM-120s and turning away a lot of the aircraft and taking out a lot at the same time, while also intercepting any anti-ship and guided missiles that they fired. At the same time, the F-15s and the F-35s outranged majority of the aircraft that were there and fired before they could make their salvos known. A few of the anti-ship missiles that were fired were easily taken down by them and any ship in the region. Majority of the attacking aircraft were either destroyed, damaged, or turned away, with only 2 F-16s being lost in that time. During the attack, we launched a few F-16s to fire SLAM-ER missiles on the Black Sea fleet. These were easily intercepted, and while they were no means meant to destroy the fleet, they were sent over to deplete a bunch of their missile defenses to make a larger attack a little more successful. F-15s arrive over eastern Ukraine and are met with 2 MiG-31s. Now, the MiG-31 is a fast interceptor, flies high, has a powerful radar, and has missiles that outrange the F-15s. They are actually caught off guard, and the F-15s are able to fire on them first. After dodging multiple AIM-120Ds, the MiG-31s are then engaged by Ukrainian surface-to-air missiles. One is shot down almost immediately, but the other one continues to fire on F-15s that go defensive. It is then engaged by the same Ukrainian surface-to-air missile and is destroyed. At the same time, on the northern Ukrainian front, 6 F-15s are able to finally pick up Su-57s on radar. The Su-57 is the new Russian stealth fighter. There are only 4 currently in service at this time, so these 2 Su-57s make up 50% of their stealth fighter capabilities. Due to them being stealth fighters, the F-15s actually have to close very close with their AIM-120Ds, closer than normal to engage both Su-57s. After having the F-15s push in on afterburners and fire multiple salvos of AIM-120s, they're able to take down both Su-57s. This is a huge win for the opening salvo of NATO aircraft over eastern Ukraine, and now leaves Russia with only 2 stealth fighters in its inventory. We then launched 4 B-1Bs out of Italy. Now total they carried 96 long-range anti-ship missiles, and the goal was to fire them on every ship in the Black Sea to hopefully cripple their naval capacity. These long-range anti-ship missiles are very stealthy. They can be targeted anything from ground to naval and can be retargeted and waypointed around threats. We took this opportunity to also salvo a few at targets of opportunity in Crimea, like ground-based radar and ELINT jamming trucks that were caught by the rivet joint. This was done in a hope that a few would be able to get through their air defense network and cripple their early warning system from their radars and help with the jamming situation, because trying to get radars through their jammers on the ground was becoming difficult. After we salvoed a few of the long-range anti-ship missiles, we set it off into a holding pattern somewhere in Romania to wait to follow up the attack. As the missiles approached the main bulk of their fleet, we took a few of them and routed them to the north a bit to kind of hold off, so that way any remaining ships would be hit, and we would allow them to kind of focus fire on the ones that were coming in and sneak them through their air defenses to take out majority of their ships. The long-range anti-ship missile salvo was able to overwhelm the enemy fleet and damage and cripple majority of the vessels, sinking a lot of high-value targets in the Black Sea. Though due to an issue of my own, because I made the mistake of retargeting them a few times, one ship was able to survive the salvo, and a bunch of LASRAMs were wasted for no reason because I intervened when I shouldn't have. The salvo fired on Crimea was able to do a lot of damage. The guided missile frigate that was guarding Sevastopol was destroyed, and the missiles rerouted and targeted the airfield into Sevastopol. While checking on the progress of a few LASRAMs that were just still flying in the blind, we noticed a large formation of aircraft coming out of the east of the Black Sea. Due to the size and the slow speed of the aircraft, it was assumed that these were bombers. They could have been anything from Tu-95 Bears to Tu-160s to Tu-22s, carrying anything from large anti-ship missiles to cruise missiles to other guided weapons. So we routed every F-16 we had on cap over to intercept these aircraft before they got anywhere near our fleet. The aircraft were positively identified as Tu-95 Bears, and the F-16s began unleashing salvos on the defenseless bombers. At the same time, the B-1B bombers launched another barrage of long-range anti-ship missiles on the remaining ships in the Black Sea. With their air defense network severely destroyed, they had no protection from these LASRAMs and were easily taken out. At the same time, the F-16s were able to close the remainder of the Tu-95 Bears. Without any sort of escort, they were no match for the F-16s, and the valuable Tu-95s were able to be stopped well before they launched their payloads on any targets in the Black Sea. We then had the Arleigh Burke destroyer in the Black Sea start targeting air defense sites in Crimea with its 56 Tomahawks. Now, majority of these Tomahawks were going to be taken down, and this is more of a softening blow to take out any SHORAD or long range or radars that are in the area for a larger follow-up strike with the SSGN out in the Mediterranean. Each of these air defense sites are guarded by a number of SHORADs, anything from Tunguskas to Tors to the dreaded Pansteer. Now, these cruise missiles are slow, low-flying, and easily detectable, and can easily be shot down, but for each missile they shoot down, they're also expending another one, which will leave them depleted for a larger strike to follow up on. At this point, radar ended up picking up a large number of guided weapons over Turkey. Now, these could have been cruise missiles fired from another group of Tu-95 Bears farther to the west, way outside our radar coverage, and sneaking them through Turkey was actually pretty smart, as a majority of our radars and everything were pointed more towards Crimea. We were actually very lucky that an AWACS was refueling in the area and was able to pick them up. We then dispatched every fighter we had in the cap area, every fighter in the airbase along the flight path of these guided weapons to go and try to intercept as many as possible, whether it be with guns, trailing them with their AIM-9s or their AIM-120s. The more we could take out, the less could cause damage when they actually reach their intended target. A few flights of F-16s were able to make contact with the cruise missiles over Turkey and fired every single weapon they had down to every single last bullet on them. These numbered in the hundreds, and it was going to take every flight of aircraft that we had in the area and every single surface vessel we had to shoot these things down. We were able to catch them early, which was lucky, but their numbers were very great. Judging by the weapon's flight path, we were able to deduce that the target is the Aegis offshore radar installation deep inside Romania. Now, we were able to catch them early, and it is a long flight for them to go, and we have a lot of aircraft and destroyers and ships well inside the range of these weapons. So we started moving any craft, anything that we had on the Black Sea within the flight path, hoping we can unite as many forces as possible to take these weapons down, as they were very great in number. Thanks to the early warning we got from our AWACS about the cruise missiles, we were able to move a lot of our surface vessels into the path of the cruise missiles, which means that we got a lot of surface-to-air missiles and sea whizzes to take a lot of them out in their flight path. While scrambling fighters to take down the cruise missiles over Turkey, our own cruise missiles were striking all over Crimea, taking down surface-to-air missile sites and SHORAD sites that we had designated and wreaking havoc on their air defense. Even with all the fighters we had in Turkey and even all the surface vessels we put into the flight path of these cruise missiles, it still took a flight of F-18s out of Romania while in Romanian airspace to take down the remainder of these cruise missiles. The volley they fired on us was absolutely massive, and thanks to our early warning, we were able to stop them. After we dealt with the cruise missile strike that came from over Turkey, we decided to turn back and do another volley of cruise missiles on the Crimean air defense network. We had more sites available and targeted, and we decided to send a larger strike than the first strike to soften up the defenses more, to kind of pave way for an even larger strike to follow on and finish the air defense network once and for all. This is a little bit larger, more targeted on SHORADs than the larger S-300 sites, but it did the job. We then went in for the kill blow on the Crimean air defense network. We took the entirety of the 124 Tomahawks in the SSGN Ohio class and moved the rivet joint a little closer to kind of get a better picture of what is around a target. And we decided to salvo pretty much every single Tomahawk on the Crimean air defense network in one massive killing blow. Most of these targets were very large air defense networks like the S-300s and the Pansteers, along with ground-based Bastion anti-ship launchers and a few ground-based radars. Most of these were already kind of low on ammo. This would be their last volley that they could do in self-defense, so a lot of these got intercepted in the way and even missed some of their marks, as they were able to move some of their launchers out of the way in the long flight time it takes to get from the Mediterranean all the way up to the Crimea. We also fired a lot of them into western Crimea, where we kind of ignored the air defense in the area earlier, and those missiles were still pretty stock full, and they were pretty deadly at taking down a lot of them. That large Tomahawk strike wasn't really the killing blow that we thought it was going to be. A lot of them were intercepted and targets did move. So we used an F-16 with a recon pod and got pretty close to the Crimea region. We were able to identify the missing targets and anything that survived in the BDA. Luckily for us, we had an Arleigh Burke still with a few Tomahawks left that we could fire out and take the remainder of the vehicles out, and it completely decimated the air defense network in the Crimea, so much so that it was safe for our fighters to fly directly over the entire region, and they were not contested in any way, shape, or form. We then received word from the Ukrainians that the Russians in northern Crimea with a mechanized unit had taken 2 important bridges over the river. These were very important targets because they could start moving troops directly into Ukraine. They needed to be taken out pretty quickly. So we sent F-22s over loaded with JDAMs to go and take out the targets. Their stealth and their speed and their loiter ability kind of left them to a better position than an F-15 or anything like that because the air defense network in the area was still pretty unknown. Luckily for us, it was only a mechanized unit with no air defense network in station at the point, so our F-22s were able to fly over and do multiple passes on each bridge and take them out with their JDAMs without receiving any fire whatsoever. Thus, it slowed their advance and allowed the Ukrainians to build up a defense a little more. They would actually have to get bridgeheading units in to rebuild these bridges, and assuredly they were going to have an air defense network in place before they even begin, so we're not done with this river or this bridgehead anytime soon. Again, another submarine was picked up and quickly disappeared under the layer by our surface vessels in the Black Sea. So we sent more P-8 Poseidons over and also sent more surface vessels into the air to go flush it out. These submarines are pretty dangerous, and I've already taken a surface ship once. We're not going to let this happen again, so we're going to overreact to the situation in great force. The P-8 Poseidon started dropping sonar buoys to the south, and that actually ended up pushing the submarine into the path of our Arleigh Burke destroyer, who caught it on sonar and fired the rocket-powered torpedo directly onto it and caught it pretty much in the shallows, killing another submarine in the Black Sea. We brought in British drones from Cyprus to keep an eye on the bridgehead in northern Crimea, and lo and behold, they put a massive air defense network in the area. Now, majority of these at that current time were SHORADs, very short-range air defense sites, but very, very deadly, which means that we needed to take them out pretty quickly to be able to get follow-on strikes for anything larger that they put in that area. Over on the Ukrainian front, 2 F-15 groups ended up catching some weird stuff on radar, so I pushed them a little farther to the Russian border, and it turns out it was the remaining 2 Su-57 stealth fighters in the Russian inventory. Unlucky for us, they were able to fire missiles well before we were able to even get positive identification on them, and ended up losing an F-15 in the process. So we put majority of the fighters in that area on them to kind of push them back to the border and try to take them out. While giving chase, they ended up getting away and outside of our weapon range. We did notice that there were 2 aircraft being kind of weird off to the east a little bit. After pushing over an F-15, we noticed the highly important A-50 mainstay, which is the Russian AWACS aircraft. They do not have a lot of these, and it is their main eye in the sky. So we sent an F-15 over and killed it. And upon further inspection, a little past that was one of their jamming aircraft, another highly important air target, and pushed over and killed that also. These were huge blows to the Russian Air Force. Even though we couldn't kill the remainder of their stealth fighters, we took out 2 very important aircraft in their inventory. A few more flights of F-15Es were sent in with JDAMs over to the air defense network at the bridgehead. Little by little, these flights started to whittle away the air defense network one launcher vehicle at a time, and this is a large air defense network, and time is not our friend. Each of these flights takes 3 to 4 hours to complete, and we've sent multiple over, and they're still air defense networks, and they're still building this bridgehead up. So we need something big to finally do a kill blow and give us freedom to maneuver in this area. Thankfully, a few of our B-1Bs were fully rearmed and ready and waiting with LASRAMs to take out this air defense network. So we had it loiter in the area and fire a LASRAM until every single one of those air defense networks was down and the skies above the bridgehead were open. To add insult to injury to the Russian situation, we still had a lot of LASRAMs loaded on those B-1Bs, and they were in the area. So we pushed them pretty close to the Russian border and started taking down air defense sites inside of Russia itself. This was just a huge slap in the face of the Russians and just shows exactly how great NATO air power was in the region and how little aircraft Russia actually had left that B-1Bs, non-escorted, were able to strike Russian air defense targets inside Russia itself. The situation became apparent that I could fly F-15s into Russia, and no one was going to do anything about it. So that's what we did. We flew F-15Cs from eastern Ukraine right into Russia, and not a single fighter came up to meet us. But we did find a few A-50 mainstays, their AWACS aircraft, and guess what? Shot them out of the sky too. This was an absolute final killing blow to the Russian Air Force in the region. They had nothing to meet us, and the only thing they had up there were AWACS aircraft, which means we owned the sky on the Ukrainian front and inside Russia. After that, we just kept our cap routines up and watched the area and let the Ukrainians do their thing on the ground. Without an air force, their ground forces were pretty much getting destroyed by the Ukrainian Air Force and ground forces combined, and they had no chance at all and were quickly beaten back. The scenario ended with a triumphant victory. Combined, Ukraine and NATO were able to beat back the Russian forces and diminish their ability to wage war to a level that they could no longer continue their assault. The NATO forces ended up losing 32 aircraft, 5 ships, and a few ground-based radars, while the Russian forces lost 245 aircraft, 272 SAM sites, a number of ground-based radars and vehicles, and 22 ships. With Russia's air defenses down and their air force pretty much crippled in eastern Ukraine, it was no match on the ground between Russia and Ukraine with the help of the NATO forces in the area. While this isn't a perfect scenario and it sure isn't a crystal ball into the future of what possibly could happen, it does show that within this scenario, if we were able to take the initiative and pre-plan some forces ahead of time, that when it kicked off, we were able to get the show rolling pretty quickly and bring back a devastating strike. If you guys liked this video, give it a like, leave a comment, and let me know how you loved it and what you think about the outcome of the situation. If you guys want to see more of these, I can possibly do a few more. We can do anything from China versus Japan to North Korea versus South Korea. With this simulator, it is absolutely limitless of what we can do. We can go back to 1945. We can do it in 2030 if we want to. It doesn't make a difference. This simulator is that freaking awesome. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you the next time.